Hi, it's Sandra. Welcome to another episode of Asexualise, My Asexual Life. This is a place to be for education, information, lifestyle, and entertainment videos, all for asexuals and all about asexuality. So stay tuned. So today I have a movie review for you. As you might know by now, I'm an asexual who's sex repulsed. For me personally, I don't like seeing movies with nakedness or sex in them. And The Amazing Spider-Man 2 was no exception. It didn't have any of those things in it. Now, I've already seen The Amazing Spider-Man. This is the first one. I've got it on DVD. And I couldn't remember whether I've seen The Amazing Spider-Man 2 or not. It's a 2014 film, so we're now in 2024 when I'm recording this, so it's basically 10 years old. And it's Adam Garfield who plays Spider-Man in this particular movie, as in the first one. So, yeah. If you haven't watched this movie, don't watch this video if you don't like spoilers, because I am going to tell you the plot. I'm guessing because it's a 10-year-old movie that most of the people who are fans of Spider-Man would have watched this movie by now if they like Andrew Garfield. So, yes. I really appreciate you being here. As always, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon for more movie reviews. So let's get stuck in. So, this movie here, the first one, left off where Spider-Man and Gwen Stacy had to break up because Gwen Stacy's dad died, saving Peter's life, basically. And he said, please promise me something, that you'll leave my daughter alone, because he doesn't want to hurt. And so at the end of this first movie, he basically breaks up with her, with Gwen, and it's a really tough time because she's got the dad's funeral and he's not really there for her, and she comes to the door expecting him to comfort her, but instead he's got to like leave her alone. And she's like, oh, it's my dad, isn't it? He said something to you. So anyway, the movie ends like that, but in the very last scenes, I think it's in the credit or after the bulk of the movie's gone, just before the credits. I can't remember if it's in the credits or just before the credits. But basically, he's in class with Gwen and he cheekily hints at the fact that he's still going to be around for her. He's still going to be connected to her. There's still going to be some attachment there. So I think this is really important. And yeah, you kind of know that something's going to happen in the next movie, which is the one I saw today. So in the movie I saw today, I couldn't remember I'd seen it or not. I remembered I have seen the movie at the very, very end of the movie because of something that happens at the end of the movie, which I won't go into at the moment. But when the very end of the movie came, I remembered I saw it in the cinema before. But throughout the rest of the movie, I can't remember seeing it. I thought I'd seen clips of it, but I couldn't remember seeing the whole thing. But I remember being in the cinema thinking, oh no. And so, yeah, it seems like I saw it years ago, but I didn't actually fully take it all in. I couldn't remember it all. So, um, so the movie basically starts with Peter and Gwen back together. So that was kind of like weird. At first, I didn't really know what was going on because it didn't really show how they fully got back together. But in this movie, they're kind of on and off throughout the whole movie. But in the beginning of the movie, they're like, he kisses her at the graduation after battling a terrifying thing. And he's kissing her at the beginning of the movie and it's like everything's fine, but then you see him have flashbacks of her father, which she can't deal with, because one minute he's like, I'm really into you, I love you, the next minute he's like saying, I can't do this because your dad wouldn't want it. I kept my I want to keep my promise to him, otherwise what type of guy does that make me? But she keeps assuring him that it's her choice to be with him. But anyway, partway through the film, she breaks up with him. But what I liked about this movie it's first I found that a bit weird because I didn't really understand how they got to the position in the beginning of the film where he was kissing her and didn't seem to have a problem with it. Because in this film, where it ends, is the fact that he's split up with her, but he's in class with her, implying that he'll still be around and that will probably break that rule. But it doesn't really show how they got together again. It doesn't really show how they kissed and made up, if you know what I mean. So it's when it came into this movie, it's kind of like they were together again in the beginning. But then it's up and down between them, on and off, until Gwen ends it for a while in the movie. But even after she ends it, nothing's really fully ended between them. And so anyway, what I loved about this movie as well is the fact that it showed Peter Parker, aka Spider-Man. It showed how his parents died, and it went into a lot about Oscorp and the history behind everything. So I really like this episode, this film, if you like, the second in the series, because I'd forgot I'd seen it before. I only remembered the very end, at the end, which was the last few minutes of the movie. And so I liked this because it filled in a lot of the knowledge that I was lacking from seeing the more modern Spider-Mans. I was lacking some knowledge in the history of Spider-Man and what was going on. And I didn't even realize that Gwen worked for Oscorp. So that was really interesting to me because I forgot I'd seen this movie at all. I don't know where my brain must have been 10 years ago, but clearly it wasn't on the movie, or it was only on the very end of the movie. Probably because I'm a hyper romantic and there is a lot of romance in this movie. So for the asexuals who hate romance, they probably won't really like this movie very much. As a hyper romantic, it had a lot of influence and power over me, this movie. And I'm going to be talking about influence and power a bit more later on, because it's very interesting, especially as I'm a hyper romantic, how such a movie influences my feelings and my emotions and my physiology and my need for romance, right? Which you can probably guess what that's like. So, if you're not romantically inclined, you probably think it's excessively romantic, this movie, because there's a lot of chemistry between Gwen and Peter Parker. But you might know that Andrew Garfield, who plays Spider-Man, he went out with Emma Stone, who plays Gwen Stacy in real life. I believe they were dating for 4 years, I think, or having a relationship for 4 years. I think sometimes in America they call it dating even when they're in a relationship if they're not married. But anyway, they're in a relationship, I believe, for 4 years. But double check that, check the facts, and if it's wrong, just let me know. So yeah, there was a lot of chemistry between the two, a lot of romance, and Andrew Garfield is still kind of cute. Even though I like the new Peter Parker, I still think Adam Garfield is a cute guy, and I like clean shaven, short dark hair guys. So obviously, aesthetically, I think he's really good looking in that way. So that does help with the movie. But in the beginning of the movie, it shows how his parents died. So it shows that his parents went on the plane. They left Peter with his auntie, and they went off into this plane, and there was something secretive that they knew, and they knew that other people had found out about what they know, and so they had to go and flee the country because they were no longer to be safe, and that would be putting Peter's life in danger. But as they were on the plane, Peter's dad was uploading this this file, or files, was uploading these files about stuff he'd known, because he was like a scientist for 20 years, I believe. It wore a lab coat for 20 years. They make remarks about that. So basically all the information that's needed about what's going on with Roosevelt, there's something to do with Roosevelt, then yeah, this is going to be uploaded. But on the plane, there's a bad guy, and he knocks out the pilot. He locks the wife in the toilet, and then he basically lays into Peter Parker's dad and tries to kill him. First of all, he puts a bullet through the wife gets out of the toilet. He puts a bullet through her, and then Peter's dad's trying to save Peter's mum, the wife. And and every time he's trying to upload this file, because if anything happens to them, they need this uploaded so someone else has the evidence of what they found out and discovered. And so there's this huge fight on the plane, and the bad guy eventually ends up going off the plane. I think he gets caught in the turbine. Is it called a turbine? I don't know, because I don't go on planes usually. The bit that goes round and round catches flames, and the baddie goes out like that. And then basically the mother's either dead or dying, and she's like this on the chair. And then Peter's dad, that the whole plane's on fire. The pilot's, by this time dead by the look of it. And yeah, there's no hope for them, so they just plummet into their death, and that's how they die. And so I was interested in this background information. I was interested in how Oscorp was. The fact that, Oscorp, the head of the Oscorp, who is Harry Osborn's dad, died basically. And his dad, Harry Osborn, is Peter's best friend, but they haven't seen each other like 8 years. And Harry's dad has got some thing wrong with him, like infection type of thing that turns him into a monster looking thing. And it's in his DNA that he's passed on to Harry. So you see Harry Osborn's dad dying and dies, and then Harry becomes the CEO of Oscorp, and he's only 20 years old. But his dad said before he died to Harry that the illness, condition, or whatever comes out at his age. It starts with shakes in his hand, and then it comes and it's visible. And so he gives him this thing, this little device, and said everything, the information you need to keep you safe and to live as long as possible is in this device, basically. So that is the end of that. But the board of directors are not happy that Harry's in charge, and so they try to get rid of Harry later on in the movie. They're trying to get rid of him before, but they don't have enough way of getting rid of him till later in the film. But he employs someone called Felicia, I think her name is. She used to work for his dad anyway, for Harry's dad. I might be wrong about the name, so please correct me if I'm wrong. But anyway, she acts like a secretary or assistant to Harry, and they have to answer to her. And there's a reason why I'm telling you this, because later she tells Harry some interesting information. So, Peter puts a villain in jail, and what happens is Harry is going to die, because Harry does start developing all these symptoms of the condition that his dad had. And Peter's come to see Harry, who's in a board meeting with the CEO, board of directors. He's the CEO, but there's like a board of directors. But he comes out of the meeting because Peter's come and said, "Hey, Harry, I heard about your dad." And Harry's like, "I haven't seen you for years." And he's like, "Yeah, it's been 8 years." And so those two spend some time together. And Harry's like saying he doesn't like Spider-Man's ridiculous, because he at this point he's not supposed to know that Peter's Spider-Man. Spider-Man's, you know, silly for wearing Lycra or whatever, looks ridiculous, and he doesn't really see the point of Spider-Man. And Peter's sticking up for Spider-Man, saying that I think he gives people hope. So anyway, as the movie progresses, and Harry gets more and more sick, Harry realizes that spider venom can heal, and he realizes that Spider-Man can heal himself. And so he wants Spider-Man's blood, because he thinks that it will enable him to heal from his illness. But it could have the opposite effect and go badly wrong and turn him into a monster. And so what happens is he asks Peter to speak to Spider-Man because Peter takes photographs of Spider-Man, and he asks Spider-Man if he can talk to Spider-Man. He asks, Peter Parker to talk to Spider-Man and ask for his blood. And Peter's like, I'll see what I can do. And Harry gets really angry with Peter, saying, I'm dying. You're supposed to be my best friend. Anyway, what then happens is eventually Spider-Man comes and pays him a visit and says to Harry, I can't give you my blood because it might do something bad to you. And anyway, so meanwhile, there's this guy called Max Dillon, and he has not been treated very well by Oscorp, and he was the one who worked on powering the grid of electricity throughout the city. But his talent that everyone's using, like the electricity grid, his talent is unseen, unnoticed, and he feels like no one cares about him. He's not seen by anyone, he's not cared about. And on his birthday, he's like singing happy birthday to himself, but he becomes obsessed with Spider-Man because Spider-Man at one point saves his life. And he says, you're the guy, you're my man, you look out for people on the ground, and you're welcome that I saved you. And he makes Max feel like he's really special, wanted and needed, whereas everywhere else he's not. But Max sees Gwen Stacy in the lift at Oscorp, and then she remembers his name, and whenever someone remembers his name, because no one really cares much about him, it's a big deal to him, and he takes it to heart. And so what happens when it's his birthday, all the people in the Oscorp, they all leave and they ask him to stay behind because there's been a problem with behind the scenes of the electricity grid. There's this pipe that's come undone, so they ask him to go and sort it out, but he calls for help and asks someone to help him because it's not safe for him to go there on his own, because it means him standing on a structure and then leaning over to put these pipes across, and it's not safe. And he asks for help, and they all leave him and they don't care about him. It's horrible. And so as he's trying to fix this pipe together, he then falls into a tank of electric eels, and he mutates, and he becomes Electro. And so basically, instead of dying, his whole body changes so that it looks like electricity. It looks like it twinkles or sparkles, and it looks like it's silver, and he's completely powered by electricity. So he's disfigured to what he usually is, and he's completely lit up, and he gets more and more power the more he takes from power supplies, basically, which when he does that puts the whole city in jeopardy because it blacks out a lot of the city. So when he first gets out of the factory, and he's this Electro, but he's not calling himself that yet. He's gotten these electric eels mutated, and he's become Electro, but he doesn't call himself that at the moment. He's surrounded by police, and Spider-Man comes and tries to talk him out of doing anything silly. And Spider-Man doesn't recognize him at first, and Max is like, you should remember me because you saved my life. And then he's like, oh yeah, I remember you, but he doesn't totally remember him. So Max again feels left out and a bit used. And then what happens is the guy who plays Electro, he is in this scenario. He's a very good actor, actually. Quite a famous actor. But anyway, Electro in this scenario, before he calls himself Electro, he is surrounded by police. Spider-Man's trying to help him, but one of the police officers takes a shot and goes to shoot Electro. Electro thinks that Spider-Man set the whole thing up to capture him and no longer trusts Spider-Man. So this is when they start having major fights. And no longer is Electro interested in Spider-Man being his friend. He wants to instead seek revenge on him because he feels betrayed by him. And I think this is a really powerful part of the story, that, you know, you can't just mess with people's lives, because if you mess with people's lives and you don't pay attention to people, and, you know, you block them out, you don't really care about them, you don't give them the time of day, you don't really care on a genuine level, this can make people go insane. This can make people very angry and miserable and have severe mental health problems to the point where they're mentally unstable. This happens in real life as well, like the consequences of people being neglected, basically emotionally, having their emotions neglected, does usually impact them. It doesn't make everyone like a monster. Some people in real life get very withdrawn and, you know, depressed, and they wouldn't go around hurting anyone probably but themselves. But it's very relevant, I think, to real life, the storyline where you should not be neglecting people, you should not be uncaring towards people, you should not give a shit about people. People should care about people. The world should have more caring people in it. Do you know what I mean? So in the future, a lot of people will be turning to AI for companionship and friendship. In real life, I truly believe that, because I think there's too many people who are feeling neglected, left out, unloved, unadored. And it's okay to say, you know, people love you and people care about you, but it's another thing to actually have it happen in practice. And unless you've got someone in practice actually doing the things and giving a shit about you and caring about you, it's very hard if you're on your own trying to battle that people do care about you if you don't actually see that, if you don't see evidence of it. It's hard for the human brain to actually accept that. So I think movies are a powerful way of mirroring some aspects of reality and giving us a reality check as a society, saying, hey, you know, this is what happens when you emotionally neglect someone. They can actually turn into a monster because you neglected them, you didn't care about them, and they seek out power. You know, there are some people that get like this in real life. Other people choose to be self-defeating, if you know what I mean, self-deflating, but even that type of person can hurt those around them inadvertently because they have been neglected in real life. So I think this film is very powerful reflection of what happens in real life in these scenarios. Obviously it's exaggerated, you know, he's Electro, you know, that's not what usually happens in real life, but the actual principles behind what this movie is trying to say is, it was saying we shouldn't be neglecting people, we shouldn't be laughing at people's expense, we shouldn't be calling people friends if you don't really mean it, you shouldn't be bigging someone up and making them feel great about themselves when really you don't mean it. You're just doing it to please yourself. You're just doing it for selfish reasons. You got to genuinely care about people in this world. Do you know what I mean? It's important. So anyway, as the movie progresses, Electro gets more and more stronger and turns to revenge on Spider-Man because he feels absolutely betrayed and hurt. And what happens is Electro does get captured and he ends up going to this institution which is meant to be for the mentally insane, and he's experimented on, and he's in this kind of contraption, and one of these like scientist people is just really horrible, and they're experimenting and they're dipping him in water and they're putting electricity through his body and they're basically torturing him. And Harry finds out that they are doing this to him. They're doing live experiments on people. And Harry finds this out because, if you remember, I said Harry's dad died and Harry's dad gave him like this device, and this device Harry happens uh to knock it in some way so that it opens up projections of all these different files, which is secret stuff. And he finds out that there's suits of armor. They're experimenting on people. He finds out about Max Dillon, who they've wiped off the staff list because they don't want the public finding out that he has been mutated because of these eels, and it's a health and safety hazard because the shares and will go down in Oscorp, the consumer confidence would go down in it, and they can't have that. So instead, they try and wipe his identity like he never existed in the company, and he doesn't exist now. And so they can't basically be traced for that. But Gwen remembers she spoke to Max in the lift and tries to find out information on him because she works at Oscorp. She's found out, and then these people come after her because they don't want her to know this stuff. And then Peter happens to come and save Gwen, but they end up in this closet together, and then they end up kissing again when they're meant to have broken up. So yeah, there's a lot of romance in this film. As a hyper romantic asexual, this really got to me in a very romantic way, as you can imagine. The chemistry between those two I thought was amazing, and all the time I just wanted them to be together. I'm like, why can't you just be together instead of this on-off relationship all the time? You know what I mean? I hate it in movies when, you know, the guy loves a girl and the girl loves a guy, but a lot of the time they're just messing around, not being together, and it just really infuriates me. You know what I mean? Because this happens in real life. There are so many people who go around being in love with other people, and they don't even tell these people. They'll have like they'll love someone and try and get a relationship with someone else, and they'll still love the person they fell in love with at college or uni or even school, and they just don't tell that person. Or it might be someone they knew in their work, and they just don't tell that person. It just goes on for years and years. I'm not like that. I tend to tell these days. I probably was like that in the past, but these days, if I'm interested in a guy, I just tell him. Obviously, if I've just got a little bit of traction, that's different. But if I'm really, really interested, like really attracted to the guy, and he's on my mind, then I'll say something, because I'd rather say something while I'm alive, to say it, than end up, you know, not being here and not saying what I've meant to said, even if that guy doesn't reciprocate. I'm okay with that, right? I don't like these storylines where they don't actually say how they feel. They just pull off and pretend like they don't care, but really do. And in part of the movie, Peter and Gwen are trying to be just friends, and it really just doesn't work because they're too attracted to each other. And I think that is a very good portrayal, because in real life, that's what would happen usually. If two people love each other and they're really attracted to each other, they can't just be friends. They just can't. It doesn't work, right? Two people who are really attracted to each other and love each other, they can't just be friends, because they love each other. They want more than that. It just doesn't work, you know. And I think in this movie they did show that. They showed it well when they tried to be friends, and then he was like, and they were trying to set boundaries which didn't work, and the boundaries they were setting were basically telling each other things about what they liked about the other person, saying you can't do that. And basically they liked so much about each other and their mannerisms and everything that they just couldn't be friends, because they need to be more. But Gwen in this movie is fed up with the up and down emotions of being with Spider-Man, being with Peter Parker, and because he can't make his mind up where he should be with her or not, because he keeps getting flashbacks of her dad saying, "Don't be with my daughter," then she decides to go to Oxford University. So in this movie, she's going to go to Oxford. She got into Oxford, and she's basically says goodbye to him in this movie, and he goes after her. So that's later on in the movie, towards the end. And so what happens is I told you that Harry is dying, and Spider-Man refuses to give blood to Harry. And then what happens is Harry's assistant, which I think is called Felicia, she it begins with F anyway. She ends up telling Harry that they got rid of all these spiders, that they're experimenting with spiders, and the venom in the spiders they were able to take the venom in the spiders and create mass destruction weapons with it somehow. With the venom in the spiders, basically, they were able to create mass destruction with biological weapons, as far as I understand. And the spiders were destroyed, but some of the venom was still kept in case it was needed in the future. And so Harry wants to have the venom, but the council people, the board of directors, sorry, I should say, they take over Oscorp and get rid of Harry and basically tell Harry to get out. You're no longer in charge. And you're no longer in charge, because they stop him searching the files for Max Dillon, and they stop him from knowing, well, they don't want him to know stuff he's not supposed to know, or they don't think he's supposed to know, because obviously it exposes them for who they are. Because Harry found out they're doing experiments on humans, including Electro, because he found out everything that was going on. All the suits of armor, which are like big robotic suits that can cause mass destruction, basically, as far as I can understand. Because Harry found out that, the board of directors takes over and tries to get rid of Harry. Harry says, oh, it's all right, I know, I'll leave myself. And then Harry goes to Electro, who's been captured, and that scientist's been experimenting on him, and he says to Electro, I need your help, because you're the only one that can save me, because he needs to get the venom that is left from the spiders, but it's in like a part of the building, and he's got no access anymore. So he needs Electro to help him, and so he can set Electro free from this device. But in exchange, he wants Electro to help him get the spider venom to heal him. So the people are coming, basically the bad guys are coming after Electro and Harry, when they realize Harry's gone into the place where Electro is, and Harry's saying, I need you. And because Max Dillon, I told you, who's went in the electric eels, became Electro because he was mutated. When I said he was Max, no one cared about him. People gave him false promises and hopes, or people dashed his hopes. People didn't really give a shit about him. And as Electro, people take notice of him because he's powerful, he's strong. He can knock out a whole city or more, with just taking the power up, right? So he feels something. He feels like he's someone, and people take notice of him, whereas before no one did. And because Harry said, I need you, like, Electro's like, why should I trust you? And Harry's like, because I need you. And he's like, what did you say? It's because I need you. I need you. Only you can save me. I need you. And because he's needed at last, then he and Harry team up together to basically wreak havoc and get revenge on Spider-Man. And so I think that people in real life probably do go to the dark side sometimes because of how much emotional neglect they've been through, and how, they want to be loved, they want to be careful, they want to be needed. People in real life need to be needed a lot of the time. Otherwise, what's the life purpose a lot of the time? Do you know what I mean? Unless they're mindlessly just sat there watching TV day after day. And even the most introverted person at some point will probably think, I wish someone actually cared, do you know what I mean? Rather than just sat being in. There's nothing wrong being introvert. That's not what I mean. I mean people who are introverted, withdrawing to themselves, and don't have people who actually around them who seem to need them. Everyone needs to be needed, whether you're introvert or extrovert or ambivert. I know a lot of introverts like time on their own, but it's still good for introverts to be connected to people, and have people there for them, even if it's just a handful of people. And I think it's a reflection, this movie's a reflection of some situations on site where people are emotionally neglected. People haven't got someone to care enough about them to feel needed, wanted in this world. And I think that's sad. But I wish the movie would actually influence more people to take action in that regard. But I think movies do influence us, but maybe they don't influence us enough in the best ways possible to help other people, which is what they should be doing, right? But I just think people go out of the movie thinking that's good. They understand the moral of the tale, but they don't actually take action on it. So I encourage you to take action if you see someone in your social circle who's feeling neglected and not needed or wanted, reach out to them and care. Obviously, if they're good people, if they're toxic for you, then no. But behind most toxic people, I think there was probably once someone who needed something that they never had, I'm not saying every toxic person, and I don't agree with toxic people, even people who are narcissistic, they're actually very insecure people. But narcissistic abuse is horrible. I've been on the receiving end of that a number of times, There's no excuse for that behavior. People in real life, can choose whether to follow the path of death and destruction and follow the path of evil, follow the path of revenge seeking, or they can choose to not follow in the footsteps of those who have gone before them trying to harm them. They can just leave. If you're in a situation with a bad person, a person who's bad for you, then leaving is the best thing you can do rather than waste your time, energy, and effort on getting revenge. It's not good. It's better to just leave. Sometimes the best revenge is leaving, because then they'll eventually think, oh, I've got no one to control anymore or manipulate, which is important, unless they get someone else. So anyway, going back to the movie. So Harry and Electro have teamed up. Harry gets one of the staff, like one of the directors. Oh no, I think it's actually the scientist to, the one that actually had Electro, was experimental on Electro. I think it's him. Anyway, Harry gets him to put the spider venom in him. And the guy's like, this hasn't been tested on humans. And he goes, oh, I think it has. Like, things have been, he says something about, oh, I think very well it's been trialed in humans, like it's being trialed, even if it's not well known, like it's being done in secret. Anyway, Harry has the venom injected and it goes wrong, and it causes like him to become this horrible goblin like creature. And the only thing that saves him is one of the suits his dad built, that's in this like laboratory place where he was injected, and he is able to crawl into one of the suits, and the suit heals him. So long as he's in the suit, he's like in a healing mode, but he needs a suit. And so what happens is Spider-Man goes after Electro, because Electro goes after Spider-Man after he's had more energy from the grid, electricity. So it goes after Spider-Man, and Gwen wants to help Spider-Man because Gwen's like, I know Oscorp because she works there. I know how to get into like the electricity grid. I know what you should do. She tells Spider-Man what to do with a battery and a magnet and causing an explosion with Electro. And he asks her to stay away, says he loves her. By this time, he's like stopped the car. So she's going in a taxi to get a plane to go to Oxford University early for like a summer school. He's written in the sky, I love you. They're kissing. He says, I love you, and I'll follow you wherever you go. I'll go to England with you, and there's crime there, so I can be Spider-Man there, and I love you and I want to be with you, and that's it, and this gets interrupted by the fact that Electro is wreaking havoc on the city and basically stealing all the power. So a lot of it goes in darkness. So Gwen can't obviously get her plane anyway if there's no electricity. So there's actually two planes that are going to collide if electricity doesn't come back on. So Gwen says she knows the grid and she knows how to help Spider-Man. She tells him how to get Electro with a magnetic field, basically a magnet and a very large battery, I think it is, something like that. Anyway, she tells him how to get it so it causes an explosion within within an Electro. I nearly said Magno then, within Electro. And anyway, so Spider-Man webs Gwen up to this car boot and says, forgive me, like, stay safe, I love you. And so he goes off because he knows it's too unsafe for her to be around him, because he has to go and try and get rid, put the plan in action of blowing Electro up, basically using his own powers. And so he goes off to does that, but Gwen cuts through the spider web, frees herself, and she goes to help Spider-Man. And he's saying, you can't be here. And she's saying, it's my choice. I choose to be here. It's my choice. And she was saying that earlier, it's her choice to be with him. Not, even though he said to her father that he would not see her anymore, he would avoid her so she didn't get hurt. She says it's her choice to still see him and her choice to help him. So she goes to help Spider-Man, and he has to put like these two wires together, and then they go into Electro, and he tells her, Gwen, to hit like this lever and to blow him up, basically, until he no longer exists. Meanwhile, Harry, in this he's like a goblin, and in this suit, comes and also wants to get revenge on Peter Parker, Spider-Man. He knows that Peter is Spider-Man, and he wants to get revenge because Harry's meant to be Peter's best friend, and Peter refused the Spider-Man to give him some of his blood to heal him, and he feels completely betrayed. So he comes after Spider-Man, even though Electro's blown up. He comes after Spider-Man still, and Gwen, and he says, I'm gonna take away the one thing that you love and care about the most, Gwen. And so he proceeds to fight Spider-Man. He proceeds to fight Gwen. Spider-Man tries to, they're on like this structure at one point, and Spider-Man and Green Goblin, as you know him later to be, they are fighting, and Gwen falls off, and there's lots of debris flying, and she's holding on to a piece of Spider-Man's web, but it's like a kind of mechanism, a metal mechanism, and the web ends up being entwined. So there's like Harry and Spider-Man having this fight on these like metal wheels, metal cogs, and Spider-Man has his foot in between the cogs, part of the cogs, so that Gwen is still going to be like hanging there by this spider threads. And while they battle it out, because Spider-Man's trying to fight Harry, and Gwen keeps falling and falling till eventually she falls, and he can't catch her quick enough. Spider-Man, he shoots his web, and she eventually catches hold of it, and it goes, I think it grabs hold of her like a tummy area, and then she plummets to the ground. And it's really sad, because if you didn't already know, spoiler alert, she dies. And it's really sad, and I'm not sure whether she actually, because his spider web is like, like, it's a bit bouncy, isn't it? So I'm not sure if she ended up being on the floor and hitting her head and bouncing back up again a bit, or if just she broke her neck because of the sheer impact of going all that way down. But she's dead. And so in this movie, Peter remembered when he lost his parents, his mum and dad. He's also lost the uncle in the first movie. So his mum and dad and uncle are all dead. And then at the very end of the movie, Gwen's dead as well. And she's the one he truly loves. And it's so devastating. And that's when I remembered I've seen this movie before, because I remember being in the cinema thinking, oh my God, how can they kill a main character off like that? They've just killed a main character off. I never thought they would do that. I never thought they'd kill her off. And that's how I remembered that I watched it before at the cinema years ago, because I remember walking out of the movie thinking that, but I don't remember the rest of the movie. So it's really powerful, you know? And so I think, you know, these things can really get our emotions, especially as I know that Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone were in a relationship in real life for a number of years. You know, it kind of brings it home, the fact that they were together in real life and the powerful dynamic between them. And I think movies have the power to have a huge influence on our emotions. And so I think it's very important to watch what you put in your mind, watch the type of emotions that movie is going to give you. And for me personally, as a hyper romantic and hyper kisser, like there was so much romance in this and kissing and chemistry between the main two, Spider-Man and Gwen Stacy, that I just really felt like it makes me feel more romantic. Like, where's my guy? Why can't I have a guy to love me like that, but not in that dangerous scenario? You know, I don't want to be my life to be in danger like that all the time. It's like, you know, you're constantly looking out for danger. I don't want that. And I think that's why some women fall for dangerous guys in real life, because they kind of like the adrenaline rush of that, but I don't. It's very stressful. It can actually have a big impact on your physiology as well as mental health if you've got someone in real life who is constantly up and down with you like a roller coaster of emotion. So although they painted a picture of it, you know, of that in the storyline, in real life, you know, like Stacey did in the Stacey did in the movie. Why am I calling her Stacey? Gwen Stacy. Stacey's like her last name. But anyway, so Gwen Stacy. So Gwen Stacy in the movie obviously can't take Peter being like up and down, not knowing what he wants all the time. And in real life, that gets very draining, you know. And she does the right thing in the movie by saying it's over. But obviously, then she can't help but go back to him again. And that is what happens in real life. Some people go back to people again who can't make their mind up. But you have to really leave and seek a life for yourself if that person's unsure about you. And that's what Gwen Stacy's doing in the movie. So I think that's really important, you know, because she can't put her life on hold for him while he makes his mind up. And this is very true in real life. If you got someone who's on the fence about you and doesn't know where he's interested in you or not, it could be a different gender if you're into a different gender, then there has to be some sort of cut-off point. But obviously there's still a lot of chemistry between these two. And I think it does reflect real life a lot of the time, that you try to let someone go, but you can't if you love them. And you can end up on this a roller coaster of emotions, but it isn't healthy. And we need to, if someone really can't make their mind up about us, we need to let them go, because someone else could easily make their mind up about us and be like, yeah, I have no doubt that like Sandra's the right one for me, or whoever is the right one for you. So after the movie, it was really difficult for me, because I came out of the movie and I actually saw on one of the sofas in the view as I came out the toilet. I actually went to the toilet after the movie, because I never went to the toilet throughout the whole of the movie, which was really difficult for me. So it was a long movie. I think the whole time I was in there was like, it was over 2.5 hours. So anyway, I saw the guy from last year. Remember, I met a guy last year. So if you go back through all my videos, you'll see last year that I had a vision of a guy. I said this, I had a waking vision of a guy. In real life, I had a waking vision of a guy, and this guy looked a certain way. He was Indian, short dark hair, clean shave, he was quite cheeky, he was in my flat, and this was a vision I saw. And then I had another vision of this guy on the cathedral, right? And they were different age groups as these people, I think. And but it was the same guy, right? And this is a waking vision in real life. And then a few weeks later, actually, when it was National Cinema Day last year, I ended up sitting next to an Indian guy. We got talking. He was 21 years old, although he looked a lot older because he had a beard and long hair. We got talking, and then we ended up walking back. Well, we went up on the cathedral a bit, and then we ended up walking back to my home, outside my home. We ended up being outside all night talking until the early hours of the morning. And he said he felt a connection with me. And to cut long story short, I ended up being attached to him and liked him romantically. And then found out he's in love with someone else. But also, I met up with him. And he wasn't particularly nice to me. He was telling me he's a bad person. He told me that night he was a bad person. And I just thought he was down on himself. But then I find out some of the stuff he believes. And I'm thinking, this isn't good. You know, he was kind of like sticking up for a guy who's a real life, I don't know how to put it, who's a real life, very bad person who goes around extinguishing people, if you know what I mean. So that's, you know, and yeah, there's quite a lot of dangerous stuff around about him. And he thinks like saying like thanks is a chore and stuff like that. And you know what I mean? There's a lot of stuff that was very dark about him and not good. And so anyway, but he said he wasn't interested basically because he was in love with someone else, and then made me think he was interested in me. So anyway, this all happened last year when I met him at National Cinema Day and beyond. And so this guy who was there last year, he was also, when I met him as well, he said he tried to kill himself. And so, but I found out he tries to do that a number of times. So he was saying, oh, you know, I'll probably die and all the rest of it. So what happened was, is like, he was connected to me on social media. And then because he wasn't honest with me and he was saying like suggestive things on my YouTube, he was pretending it wasn't him on my YouTube channel. I blocked him, so you can't see the comments now. But it was weird. He was talking about himself, but pretending he wasn't himself, like talking about himself like in a third party context, and at one point making me believe that he might like me in the future more than a friend. Anyway, it was just very screwed up in the end, and it wasn't good for me. And anyway, I saw him sat on the sofa, and at that point he was like, when I saw him last year, he looked like it wasn't really, I felt like he was talking about not really looking after himself as well. But when I saw him today, he's like got like really pristine trainers on, pristine like grey like leisure suit, you know, like grey jogging bottoms and top and everything. It just looked like something he'd like got out of a sports shop that was really pristine clean. And he was playing around with his phone and stuff, and I knew it was him because I can tell. And I just didn't say anything to him because he don't think he saw me as playing with his phone. And, you know, as he wasn't honest with me, I shouldn't approach him. But because of the movie and because of the vision I saw, which happened to be him, I found out it was him. The vision, waking vision I had about 3 weeks before I actually met him in real life. I didn't know it was him at the cinema. But this guy had long hair and a beard. But when I saw him on Instagram a couple of years before on his post, he was the guy in my vision. He's clean shaven in that. So that's why I actually thought he was my soulmate in the vision. And so I thought he was my soulmate in real life. But obviously I got it wrong. And I write about this in my diary confessions. He's one of the guys I write about in my diary confessions of a hyper-romantic asexual 78 life essential life. He's actually the reason I started writing this book and learned all these valuable life lessons. So yeah, I decided to put how I feel in this book and to show you the journey I had from then on. And so that was really interesting. But it was hard seeing him because in the movie I've just watched, I'm a hyper romantic, don't forget. And in the movie, it's very, very powerful and influential because it's like, oh, if you love someone, if you care about them, if you've got feelings, you should tell them, especially like because life's so short. And so it's really hard because I really cared about this guy last year. But I know he's not a good person for me. So I really cared about him. So when I saw him in the cinema, part of me wanted to go up to him and say something to him because I think life is too short not to say how you feel. But this guy in real life, he doesn't actually care about me. He cares about himself and another girl, but he doesn't care about me at all. Not really. I cared about him, but he wasn't reciprocated really. And so, you know, anything that was going on from his point of view really was just for selfish reasons, connection reasons. It wasn't because he actually gave a shit about me. And so, yeah, I had to remind myself of that. But because movies are so powerful and they could create and evoke a lot of emotions within you, part of me wanted to just go and talk to him because I do think life is too short sometimes, and sometimes you just need to say things about how you feel. But I already said how I feel, and he isn't a good guy. And I thought afterwards, well, he's not going to apologize to you for like not being honest with you and treating you that way. You know, I've only ever had one guy who was my actual ex years ago when I was 16 years old. But it wasn't when I was 16. He didn't treat me well, and then years later, he did actually turn back up in my life, my ex-boyfriend, and apologized to me for the way he treated me. That's the only guy who's been an ex of mine that's actually ever come back into my life and had a genuine apology to me for the way he treated me and really meant it. Because even his best friend said, I thought he was still in love with you for all these years, but he wasn't. He just couldn't move on because he felt guilty, which he should have done. With the way he treated me was really bad. You know, and yeah, he basically talked me into having sex with him. He was my boyfriend at the time, but he was the first guy I ever had sex with. But he put pressure on me and said, you know, like, oh, everyone's doing it, and you know, it was not good. He was good. It was good with him for a first time of having sex, even though I don't like sex, because he was gentle and it didn't really hurt. But the whole like pressurizing me to have sex in the first place, saying all his mates were like doing that, and he was like a few years older than me. It just wasn't 2 or 3 years older than me. It just wasn't good. And so I think he was 2 or 3 years older than me. It just really wasn't good, you know. I was 16. I think he was 18 or 19. I can't remember. But anyway, it wasn't good, and you know, it just wasn't nice. And the way he dumped me was really bad, telling me he'd been looking at other women behind my back and all sorts, and that really impacted me. This is in real life. And so yeah, he's the only one that came back in real life and apologized, you know. But this guy I saw today at cinema, I felt like walking up to him saying, I'm glad you're still alive, because obviously I knew he was suicidal last year. But then I'm thinking, well, what's the point? Clearly he's alive. He looks like he's wearing really nice clothes and everything. So he can't be that badly off like he made out he was. Or at least he doesn't look that way, but appearances can deceive. And I'm like, you know, he's not going to apologize to you because he doesn't think that way. He doesn't think he's done anything wrong. He doesn't think, you know, he says he's a bad person, but he says it as an advantage to him. Do you know what I mean? It's like he's got so much pity for himself, but he doesn't actually say sorry for his actions that are not good towards other people. It's more like self-pity than actually caring about another person, another human being, and the way he's treated them. Do you know what I mean? So he's not that type of person to say sorry. So I thought there's no point in walking up to him. I'm like, what if you do say you're glad he's alive? Or I'm glad you're alive, even though you're a bad person to me. I mean, he's probably not going to want to hear that, but he's probably, I don't know what he would do. Ignore you or whatever. I don't know. But what's the point if nothing good's going to come of it? There isn't. You know what I mean? I have to just let him go and think, well, he wasn't good to me. But yeah. So, you know, in a romantic film kind of way, it'd probably be like the main female character would just go up to him and say, oh, I still really care about you, and I'm so sorry that, you know, like what happened to you in your past, and I'm really glad to see you alive, blah blah blah, and all the rest of it. But that's not real life. A lot of things that happen in movies are not real life. You know, you shouldn't be just forgiving someone who's and going to speak again to someone who's hurt you, who's lied to you or deceived you and not been good to you, who's basically shown he has two different faces, and it's not trustworthy, you know, because there's no actual good that's going to come of it. He's not going to apologize. He's not going to suddenly, if he was a really bad guy, which he was, and there was so much psychological damage he's got, and even psychologists have had difficulties with him, you know, with his instability in the mind, then you know what I mean, they're professionals. They're used to handling that type of thing. If they've even had difficulties with him, it's like, you know, it's not for me to like try and sort it out or get him to apologize to me when he, you know what I mean. I shouldn't have to get anyone to do that. Someone should do it because they want to. You know what I mean? And so you know, it was hard because you know I thought seeing him, I thought I was okay. I'm not really attracted to him. And then when I got back home, it all flooded back. All the memories flooded back of the fact I saw this vision of a guy who I thought was my soulmate, but I hadn't met him in real life. And then he came into my life, and then I thought he was the guy, and then he turns out to be a bad person. He kept saying he was a bad person. He kept saying that, and I didn't. I was trying to just think he was being self-depreciating. But as I write in my hyper-romantic confessions book, Diary Confessions of a Hyper-Romantic Asexual, one of the life lessons is when a guy says he's bad, believe him. Don't try to change the wording of someone just for it to suit you, right? Because I found out that relationships a lot of the time, or dating, when you first meet someone, a lot of it's fantasy and projection, and it's like the fantasy of what you want that person to be, not the actual reality of it. So if someone says they're a bad guy, you should believe them, because no good can come of it anyway. Even if they were self-depreciating, they kept saying that over and over again. At the end of the day, it's still no use to you, right? Because they're not going to value you if they don't even value themselves. I talk about all these types of life lessons in this Diary Confessions, but please get a copy of it. It's really insightful and will help you in your life, because if a guy doesn't value himself, he's not going to value you in a relationship or a friendship even. If someone neglects themselves, they're more likely to neglect you. If someone doesn't value you, they're more likely to not. Sorry, if someone neglects themselves, they're more likely to neglect you. If someone doesn't value themselves, they're more likely to not value you. If someone doesn't even respect themselves, not likely going to respect you. If he thinks saying thanks is a chore, then what the hell? Do you know what I mean? And stuff like that. So he's just not a good guy for me to be around. And so I can't go up to him and put myself in a position where I say, hi, I'm glad you're alive, and all the rest of it. I can clearly see he's alive. He looks fine. He's probably still not good with his mental health, but in terms of like having the latest clothing on, he looks like he's just come out of a sports shop. Everything looked pristine, but I didn't get too close to him so he would notice me. And I just had to check, like, is it the same hair? Is it the same beard? The way he looks? I'm like, yeah, that's him. So, and I did think he might be at National Cinema Day because he likes going to view cinema, and, he likes that day as well. So I did think I might bump into him then, but luckily he didn't see me. If he had seen me, he probably wouldn't have even spoke to me anyway. I don't even know if he was in the same movie as me. I don't even know if he came out of the Spider-Man movie, because it's the type of thing he might watch. But he looked like he was waiting to see another movie, playing with his phone. But anyway, it is what it is. And when I come out of the like Spider-Man movie and saw him, and then I walked home, it all brought it back, like all the upset and discomfort, and because movies have a powerful effect. I'm thinking, why can't I just find a decent guy who actually does love me and care about me, doesn't mess me around, it's not a bad guy, who actually is a genuine guy, but I do like younger guys. I really do. And I need to find a younger guy that genuinely likes an older girl to ever have a working relationship. Because I also saw someone on Facebook like my page today. Yesterday now, because we've gone over midnight. And I'm thinking, like, who is that? I recognize the name. And then I realized this guy was friends with me on Facebook, but he was abroad and he liked me and I liked him at one point. And now he's come back and liked my page, and he's married. So it seems weird. And one of the other guys in this book, I talk about Indian guys, he's actually on Instagram a few weeks ago with a girl who's like basically looks like the love of his life, even though you said, oh, you're an amazing friend, I could never live without you. That's not really the type of thing you exactly say to someone who's just your friend. So I think he'll probably end up being in a relationship if he's not already with that girl. So it's kind of like weird, because I'm seeing like the guys I liked being paired off with other people, in real life. So I think it's very weird, and it's like hard when doesn't mean to say they're happy. Like, even if you see a couple in real life, you see lots of couples, it doesn't mean to say they're happy. There are a lot of people that are married or in relationships that aren't even happy. So just because someone gets married or in a relationship doesn't mean to say they're happy. But I think when I see something like a movie like The Amazing Spider-Man, I see the chemistry between the two main characters, Spider-Man and Gwen Stacy, and I know they had a relationship in real life, and I see like all the love stuff. I think it's very hard as a hyper-romantic asexual, or a romantic asexual in general, to not have thoughts and feelings if you're single and you have had experience of being in a relationship or want a relationship, I think it's hard because you're like, why can't I have that? Why can't I have the love? Why can't I have the dream in reality, you know? But we've got to remember that unfortunately the movies isn't the same as real life, and a lot of the time in the movies they don't show what happens after they get together. They don't show all the tough conversations they have, the differences in lifestyles they might have, how they're not actually compatible. You know, you get characters coming together in movies that might actually be compatible in everyday life. And unless you have a succession of series to show how that plays out, that they are compatible, if they are, then it's hard to even think like that, you know? And so I just think that movies have a very powerful effect. And I think that if you're a romantic person in nature, it does make us more crave a romantic relationship. It's like, why can't I have that feeling? That feeling that the movie gives me of this kind of satiated love. Is that the right word to use? Or satisfying love? You know, like it's kind of like love embodiment, if you know what I mean. It's kind of like satiated love. I don't know if you know what I mean. So it's like a pouring out of love. It's like love is overflowing and abundant, and you know, and it's like it kind of is very alluring, I think. But that can happen in real life, but it'd be a bad thing when the person's not actually good for us and we're really chemically attracted to the person, you know. When I say chemically, like we've got chemistry with them, our bodies with their bodies, even if it's not sexual from us, you know, we can still have very like almost compulsory attraction with us being asexual and not intersex if we're not intersex, because we can be aesthetically and romantically attracted to someone so much, even emotionally, if you're really emotionally attached to them. And those combination can be as powerful as sexual attraction is for heterosexuals, for example. So I think it's very difficult when you see a movie and like, oh, I just, you know, I want what I see in the movie. I want that feeling. I want that total, like some guy really loves me so much, you know, it's just overwhelmingly amazing, you know. But when that happens in real life, it's often followed by the reality of the situation that the guy's not that great or the woman's not that great, vice versa, you know. You know, it's kind of like I was watching a dating specialist on Diary of a CEO over the last couple of days. I've watched some of that, and even they're saying that in the beginning it's like a fantasy. People are attracted to each other based on what they want the relationship to be, and basically what they are projecting the person is, when really they don't know that person, so they're attracted to the fantasy more than the reality. It's not until they start having difficult conversations down the line and they start realizing what the other person actually is, and they're not trying to impress the other person anymore, that compatibility issues really arise, and then you can see whether you're actually compatible in real life or not. And I think movies do have an effect on our emotions. Like it did have an effect on me, the fact that I wanted to speak to that guy in part, the 21-year-old, even though he's no good to me, because it made me feel like, oh, you know, you don't, because Gwen dies in the movie. It's like, oh, you don't know if something's going to happen to him or me, and you know, this might be the last chance I ever see him again, and you know what I mean. And what if he has changed in a year, and what if he's a much better guy now? What if he did apologize, but I don't think he will. I don't think that type of guy is going to change, or not in a year, because it's ingrained in him how he is through his upbringing and all the experiences he's had in his life. He is the way he is. So I don't really think anything's going to change. Usually for a person to change, they've got to actually go to therapy and be in therapy for at least a couple of years and want to change themselves and see that then they need to change, you know what I mean, and take action on it, which I don't think he would fully do. I don't think he sees all the things that are wrong and that he needs to improve on to be healthier guy for himself and even the girl he actually does love. Anyway, I want to know from you, like, what do you think of movies? Do you think they influence us into action? Because obviously, if they're such powerful storylines, it could end up pushing us to go back to an ex, or pushing us to go back to someone we dated, or pushing us to talk to someone we hadn't talked to for years. And maybe that's opening a can of worms that just should never be open again. So I'd love to know your thoughts, comments, reactions, actions from this. Don't forget to comment down below, subscribe if you haven't already, hit the bell icon so you never miss an episode. I'll see you soon on the next video live stream. I'd love to know if you've seen The Amazing Spider-Man 2 and what you thought of it. Bye.